Hello, friends. It is Tuesday, July 23rd. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Quick shout out to both Hayden Radomski and Cheesehead Fanatic 14 for becoming all-new Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube members. Appreciate you guys a ton. Also, huge bonus episode from Ross Uglum. More of those are going to be coming. Some of them will be members only. Some of them will not be. And then, of course, you can always check them out on the audio side as well. So make sure to check out Ross's report from day one of training camp as well. Tons and tons of great Pack-A-Day content out there for you. Of course, Jacob Westendorf and Owen Reese, also with their episode today, they're discussing more of the Jordan Love side of things. So like I said, there is a ton of stuff going on in the Pack-A-Day world, and it is a phenomenal time to be a Packers fan. Day one of training camp is in the books. First thing I want to say, shout out to freaking Packers fans. The crowd was huge. It was, the vibe was immaculate from the moment I stepped on site. You could tell there was a buzz around the stadium. It was just awesome. Like it just made you feel like everything that you wanted to feel on day one of training camp. There's always like a little bit of nostalgia from all the times you've gone to camp in the past, and there's always a special feel on day one. I think there's a little bit, certainly, of a positive buzz surrounding this Packers team, and it's just awesome when it matches the passion of the fans, and the fans are completely geeked up about everything, and it was just a really cool atmosphere. So shout out to the Packer fans who showed up in droves for day one of camp. By the way, if you want to get to training camp and you want a seat in the bleachers, if day one was any indication, I would make sure to get there pretty freaking early because I know the stands filled up very, very quick on day one. As many of you know, this will be my second episode covering day one of practice. What I will be doing, just like I did last year, is doing a quick hits episode immediately following practice. I'm going to get done with practice, drive home, and immediately record that episode and give you the 2, 3, 4 things that were really key to that practice. If you haven't checked that out yet, I would highly recommend doing so. And then there will always be a deep dive into everything that happened in the entirety of practice, everything that I noticed, everything that was noteworthy. And that will, of course, air on the usual morning slot, 5 a.m. in the mornings, which you are now listening to. So just as a note, if you haven't, again, checked out the quick hits yet, make sure to do so. I'm going to start with the things that I went over in the quick hits, but I'm going to do it in a much more abbreviated fashion. So you're definitely going to want to make sure to go check out that episode. Of course, it goes without saying at this point, the biggest piece of news from day one was Jordan Love's hold-in. And my big thing here is it's not concerning as of yet. I'm totally fine with it as of now. As I mentioned on the quick hits episode, there's a part of me that even thinks that this might be a good thing to expedite this and maybe get things even more to a deadline spur action sort of thing. It is very, very abundantly clear that both these sides want this done, that they're both operating in good faith. Jordan Love was on the practice field, smiling, laughing with Brian Gutekunst, having fun with his teammates. There's no villain here. And I know I already saw some people in the comments from the initial saying that like Jordan Love is the bad. There's just no way. We have to understand the business side of these things. And you don't have to like it. And nobody has to like it. I'm not saying that. But we do need to understand that this is a massive business. And these are earth-shattering decisions for the Packers, and that will go into the long term, certainly the next multiple seasons, how this will affect the Green Bay Packers, this contract will. And this is going to affect Jordan Love for the rest of his life. I mean, if he goes out at a practice and, pulls an Alex Smith and his legs just, done, well, that's going to certainly change things. You want to make sure that you secure everything that you should be securing prior to anything like that having a remote opportunity or chance to happen. And the big thing here is these are, again, glorified OTA minicamp practices, these first few with no pads. There's a very strict time limit. This first practice was under an hour and a half. Jordan Love probably missed out on 20, 25 reps from day one. It's not to say that maybe things wouldn't have gone better if he was out there, and you want as many reps as you can with your wide receivers and with your teammates. I can promise you, come playoff time, whether the Packers win or lose, you're not going to be saying, or if Jordan Love has a bad play, you're going to be like, remember those first couple days of camp when he held out? That was why. That's why that play happened poorly in the NFC Championship. It's not going to be a thing. It's really not going to be a thing. Now, we have the right to reserve judgment and change minds if this lingers on for a significant period of time. Then it will meander between who's at fault and people will feel different ways. But for right now, I totally feel like this is going to get done sooner rather than later. It could even be done by Tuesday before practice. Who knows? Maybe as you're listening to this, maybe that deal is already done. Either way, I expect this to get done expeditiously. And I do think that, again, both sides are working diligently to help each other get this done so that it is beneficial to everyone. And I'll just leave it at that. The number two thing was with Jordan Love being out, Sean Clifford had a very nice day. I thought, for the most part, there was a one team period early where it was like a lot of runs and screen passes, not a lot of stuff down the field. And then they did a lot of red zone. Those were your team activities for the day. No 2-minute drill, no move the ball period, nothing like that. But there was red zone. And for Sean Clifford, who had to take over as basically QB1 for this practice with Jordan Love out, red zone for for any quarterback, but certainly a young quarterback, that's the toughest area of the field for a QB. Like everything is compressed and compact, and there's not a lot of space. You got to anticipate throws. You got to throw in a line. And if you do anything just to tick off, there's a good chance that thing gets tipped or maybe even intercepted. I thought he did a great job of throwing with anticipation. 2 great anticipation throws to Dontavian Wicks. Had, I think, 5 touchdowns total, 2 to Wicks, 2 to Dobbs, and then 1 to Malik Heath. The Heath one was low, only where Heath could get it. Heath dug it out. He was close to getting in or maybe down at the 1. There was a Wicks one as well that was close to getting in or down at the 1. They called them all touchdowns. Had a great anticipation throw to Wicks that, again, Wicks laid out for. It was a perfect practice play because it was a really good throw, an amazing catch, and great coverage by Keyshawn Nixon on the play. It's a win all the way around. And like I said, Wicks was just a little bit better on that one to get the touchdown catch, but it was a great anticipation throw from Clifford, and he just navigated everything well. Now, there was a lot of pressure by the defense, and I thought for the most part, he did a really nice job of trying to buy time and navigate the pocket, which is what you want to see as well. But the big thing here is that when you have practices where your QB1 is out, there are teams and there are times in the past, even with Green Bay, where everything just sort of hits a screeching halt. And the last thing that you want on day one of training camp is everything to just be disjointed on offense and nothing can get going because Jordan Love's not there. And I thought Sean did a fantastic job stepping up, leading the offense. He was, again, talking to his guys along the sideline, saying great job, getting them fired up. Just some really cool leadership traits there as well. Overall, nice practice. And I'm not saying here that, Green Bay's got another QB1. They've got another starting quarterback or anything like that. There have been a lot of players over the course of time who've had some really good practices. And I'm not saying that in regards to Sean Clifford. I'm saying that in regards to for all of these camp practices moving forward. It's worth remembering guys like Lindsey Pipkins and KB Anento, Tim Boyle, Alex Light. We can go Raven Green. We can go on and on. There have been a lot of Packers over the course of time. DJ Williams, who crushed it in minicamp and OTAs and opening training camp, and then nothing really became of him. There have been millions of guys that have had really great practices. And I know our initial instinct is to immediately hype players up or tear players down. Guys are going to have good practices. Guys are going to have bad practices. Doesn't mean they're great. Doesn't mean they're terrible. The success of these NFL players is stacking it, as Mike McCarthy always used to say, stacking it one day at a time over and over and over. And that's how you become great. It's not by having a great practice. It's by having great days all the time. That's greatness. And so I really loved what Sean did overall in this practice. But again, I don't want anyone to get too hyped and be like, yes, they've got another, starting caliber quarterback. Good day for Sean. We'll see if we can kind of continue to stack that success moving forward. And he might need to as the QB1 again on Tuesday, if that does in fact come to fruition and Jordan's deal is still not done. All right. The next and sort of third and final takeaway was the offensive line rotation. Rasheed Walker, left tackle, Elton Jenkins, left guard, Josh Myers, center, Sean Ryan, right guard, Andre Dillard, right tackle. Zach Tom was back practicing, but limited in practice. that was your starting offensive line. You can basically take Dillard out and put Zach Tom in, is what likely would have been the starting lineup: Walker, Jenkins, Myers, Ryan, and Tom. But again, it was Dillard in for Tom. But we did see a couple times in red zone periods and in that earlier team period, Rasheed Walker at left tackle, Sean Ryan at left guard, Elton Jenkins at center, Jordan Morgan at right guard, and Andre Dillard at right tackle. And there was enough Elton Jenkins at center that it made it intriguing enough to be like, that's interesting. Mostly due to the fact that the Packers said after minicamp that they were going to try to maybe have some of these players get a little bit more solidified along the offensive line. Now's kind of the time where you start getting reps at certain positions. But we saw Jordan Morgan getting some reps at guard and tackle still. And we saw Elton Jenkins get legitimate reps with the ones at center with Josh Myers out of the lineup. As you guys know, this is something that I want to see continued with Josh Myers, is to have him have competition. And I would be all for Elton Jenkins pushing him. And if that means Josh gets better from that competition and from Elton pushing him, awesome. That's great. Hopefully he can step up and have the best year of his career. Still think there's untapped potential there for Josh Myers. But if he doesn't respond to it well, and we sort of see same Josh Myers, all right, maybe it is time to go Elton at center and maybe a Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan combo at guard. There's a lot of different ways that this could go, but if you're maybe thinking that we're going to see a solidified offensive line on day one, or maybe Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan and Elton Jenkins and these guys not flipping spots, that was not the case. We still saw those guys moving around. All right, players who did not practice: Marshawn Lloyd with a hip injury, Kitano Ladapo, Jaden Reed, Corey Ballantyne, Caleb Jones, Tucker Kraft, Donovan Jennings, and of course, Jordan Love, contract related. Your new injury here was Marshawn Lloyd with the hip injury. Hopefully it's nothing long-term. Hopefully it's just something small. He did not work to the side or anything like that we saw. He was out there, but not participating in any way. Kitano Ladapo also not in the rehab group, nor Jaden Reed. Corey Ballantyne was working with a trainer outside. As I've talked about in the past, usually you go from maybe being on the bike inside or talking to a trainer inside to then coming outside and working with a trainer when you're getting closer and closer, and then working your way up to practice in individual drills and then getting back into team drills. We saw Corey Ballantyne working with a trainer outside. Usually that means that he might be the closest to returning, but we'll keep an eye on all of these guys. And again, Jordan Love also out with the contract situation, as we talked about. Of those injuries, Marshawn Lloyd, the only one that was not on a PUP or non-football injury list. Everyone else outside of, again, Jordan Love was already on PUP or the NFI list. Two players that were practicing, we talked about Zach Tom. He was back only in individual drills. And then Tyler Davis also returned, coming off his ACL injury from a season ago. He did not practice at OTA or mini camps. He was with the rehab group. It was great to see him back practicing. I'll talk a little bit more about him before the end of the episode. Your starting lineups for the day: Sean Clifford at quarterback, Josh Jacobs at running back. Your three receivers were Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs. Luke Musgrave was your tight end. And then, as I mentioned, Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, and Andre Dillard were your starting offensive linemen. On defense, they started in base, 4-3. Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary on the edges. TJ Slayton and Kenny Clark at defensive tackle. Eric Wilson, Quay Walker, and Isaiah McDuffie at linebacker. Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander at corner. And Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney at safety. Some notes on the starting lineup. First of all, just like an interesting thought process here. What would your thoughts have been if I told you at the beginning of training camp last season, all right, day one of training camp last season, what if I would have told you that 1 year from then, it would have been Sean Clifford that was quarterback one at the first day of training camp in 2024? Like, would you have thought, all right, Jordan Love was obviously a bust? Would you have thought, oh, hopefully Jordan Love's not injured? Would you have thought, oh my goodness, what if Sean Clifford was just really good? Maybe he was like the next Brock Purdy or Tom Brady or something. Like, what would your thought have been if I told you 1 year ago at this time that Sean Clifford would open training camp as QB1? Just some interesting thought process. All right, but enough about that. Other notes from the starting lineup. This Eric Wilson, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie linebacker trio. It's interesting. Edgerrin Cooper was in the nickel with Quay Walker. And then, of course, Keyshawn Nixon would go in at corner, and both Isaiah McDuffie and Eric Wilson would go out in those situations. Now, I did see Isaiah McDuffie get some time in nickel as well, so we'll see kind of how that all shakes out, I guess. But I am intrigued that this is something that they're carrying over from OTA and minicamp. I do wonder if in their base defense, maybe they want to specialize this a little bit more. Meaning, hey, or maybe they're just more likely, maybe not trying to throw quite as much at Edgerrin Cooper and maybe Tyron Hopper from day one, and maybe specifically Cooper. Maybe they're going to say, hey, Edgerrin, we're going to have you focus on nickel defense. You're not going to play in dime. That's going to be Quay. You're not going to play in base. That's going to be Quay, Wilson, and McDuffie. We just want you to focus on nickel. And maybe for a young player, first year in the league, at a tough position to learn, maybe they're trying to learn some things from what went wrong with Quay right away and maybe trying to put too much on his plate. I don't hate that idea. I think it eventually, if Cooper is as good as we think he can become, you want to get him involved in that 4-3 defense as well. Or maybe even Tyron Hopper could get a little bit more involved. And we'll see if they continue to do this. But I do think it's interesting that they're maybe specializing this a little bit more with Wilson and McDuffie on the field in 4-3. Now, I really like Eric Wilson. I really do. He's been somebody that since he's got here, he's just a little bit more than just a special teams guy to me. I think he can play some linebacker. I kind of like this role for him. He was all over the place. No, I say all over the place. He made a couple nice plays in team activities in this individual or in this first day of practice. But I do wonder, again, if they maybe want to specialize it a little bit more, have those guys have a role on defense, and it just kind of keeps everyone fresh, and it maybe keeps your roles a little bit more designated for some of these guys. I don't hate the idea. I really don't. Now, I would love if Quay and Hopper and Cooper were just all freaking amazing and you couldn't keep those three off the field and McDuffie and Wilson could go more into support roles. But if, again, you want to maybe slowly bring Hopper and Cooper along and maybe integrate them more in some nickel stuff to begin with, I'm totally cool with that. And I'm happy to see what McDuffie and Wilson can do in that base defense. Meanwhile, in the 4-3, it is noteworthy that Quay Walker is in fact the Mike linebacker, the middle linebacker. So McDuffie and Wilson are to the sides, and then you've got Quay playing the middle. And then it does seem even in nickel like Quay is sort of the primary linebacker, and again, the guy that's calling the plays and everything like that. So definitely more of a key designated role for Quay, and he does seem to be the linebacker that's going to stay on the field in pretty much every situation, although I will say I do not believe we've seen any dime yet, but my guess is that would be probably Quay as well. Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander, again, were the starters at corner. Stokes over Valentine, again. The two practices in OTAs where Jair was there, it was Jair and Stokes. Stokes over Valentine. Day one of training camp, Jair starts, and it's Stokes over Valentine again. So we've had 3 practices this offseason where the starters have been out there, and Eric Stokes has been one of those starters in all 3 occasions. Now, later in practice, we did see some Carrington Valentine at corner. More on that in just a moment. But it's interesting that it does seem that Eric Stokes is ahead of Carrington Valentine at this point. Another thing, Javon Bullard, now the starter at safety, at least on day one of camp. That had been Anthony Johnson Jr., who was the starter in OTAs and minicamp, with Bullard rotating in a little bit. Day one of training camp, that was Javon Bullard's job. And to be clear, Green Bay not always just handing out starting spots to rookies. It's not something they do super often. We saw with Edgerrin Cooper. Now he's a starter in nickel, so you could argue that's sort of a starting spot, but he's not a full-time, 4-3 linebacker or anything like that yet. Jordan Morgan got reps with the ones along the offensive line, but certainly not just given that spot. And I'm not saying Bullard is a shoo-in guarantee to win that number 2 safety spot, but day one of camp, he was the starter and is now moved seemingly ahead of Anthony Johnson Jr. on that depth chart. So those were the sort of key takeaways from the starting lineup. I talked about the Valentine Stokes thing. I did not put this in my 3 key takeaways episode. I probably would have if I would have known a little bit more. I noticed that there was a point where Jair Alexander went off and it was Valentine and Stokes on the field. And then I looked over at what corners could sub in because, again, it was the 1s and the 2s, and Jair was not over there. With injuries, I'm always super cautious because I don't want to say, well, something happened to Jair when I didn't see anything. I didn't see an injury happen. I didn't see him talk to a trainer. I didn't see anything like that. But Bill Huber in his practice recap did mention as well that Jair dropped out of practice. So, hopefully nothing, hopefully much ado about nothing completely. Maybe he just needed to use the bathroom. Who knows, right? But we'll kind of keep an eye on that on day 2 to see if Jair is out there. He did have some time with the rehab group in OTAs before being given off minicamp. You don't want to see Jair miss any time period for anything. You want him out there, but hopefully just something minor, or hopefully, again, maybe completely much ado about nothing. But it did feel like, and Bill Huber had it as well, that it looked like he fell out of practice, or dropped out of practice, I should say. So we'll keep an eye on that on Tuesday. One kicker kicked for the Packers. Remember, they have 3 on the roster. They've got Anders Carlson, Greg Joseph, and James Turner. James Turner was given day 1 of field goal kicking. He got 6 kicks, 2 different periods, 3 kicks each period. In the first period, made 2 short ones, and then missed from 43 wide right. And then in the second period, made 2 short ones as well, and then missed from 46. Also looked like wide right, although I couldn't tell exactly for sure. But he went 4 for 6 on the day, 66.6%. If my math is correct on that. So that is not a great day. Now, if he missed a couple 55-yarders or something, okay, that can happen from time to time. But 4 for 6, when I think the longest on the day was 46, I think everything was 40. Everything else was 43 or under. You don't want to be going 4 for 6 on when you're getting your opportunity. So not a great day from James Turner, not catastrophic by any means, but that's something that definitely still needs to be better. And again, Green Bay continues to search and hope that somebody takes this kicker job and absolutely owns it. Not a great first day from James Turner, missing from 43 and 46, and again going 66.67 on the day. Rashawn Gary, really nice day. 2 would-be sacks. It looked like both came against Andre Dillard. Probably not a fair fight. Rashawn Gary is a dynamic pass rusher. Andre Dillard was arguably the worst pass blocking offensive tackle in football a season ago. But they continue to give Andre Dillard these opportunities. That doesn't necessarily mean that they think that he can do it. Sometimes it's just to see, what do we got? Is there something there? Or we think maybe he doesn't have it, but maybe give him a few opportunities to prove. Either way, who knows? But Dillard's got a lot of looks with the ones due to the Zach Tom injury, and it's just noteworthy. But Rashawn Gary, 2 awesome sacks, would-be sacks. Of course, they didn't actually, pick him up and throw him to the ground or anything. But 2 would-be sacks for Rashawn Gary. He looked very, very spry on day 1 of camp. But like I said, not maybe the fairest fight against Andre Dillard at right tackle. Some other miscellaneous notes from practice. As I mentioned earlier, Tyler Davis was back in action and practicing. He got right in there right away, working with the ones. And he looked good. I thought he looked... and picked up right where he left off, which I know a lot of people maybe have this weird, bizarro, frustrating feel about Tyler Davis. I thought he was having a really nice camp last year before he got hurt. So it was a huge bummer that he got hurt. Of course, we know he's a core special teamer. I still think there's something there as a potential number 4 tight end, especially with the special teams that he plays, or maybe even number 3 if he can beat out Ben Sims. But he got right back in the mix. A large part of that was probably due to Tucker Kraft being out, but he got reps with the ones. He got, again, those opportunities. Sims got those, and of course Musgrave did as well. But they worked Davis in right away, and like I said, he looked good coming back day 1 of practice. Emmanuel Wilson had 2 really nice runs early in practice in that first team period. It was not a huge running day. They, again, had that early period where they ran a few times, and then in the red zone, there weren't many handoffs. There was a lot of, obviously, passing opportunities. But Emmanuel Wilson got a couple runs, made the most of them. He looked impressive. He made 1 really nice cut and got upfield, and the other one was pretty good as well. We talked about the Dylan Wilson competition, and, I've said it a million times, but how that becomes a competition is Wilson is close to Dylan. Because if it's close, Wilson's younger, cheaper, has more years of team control. Those are the things that potentially can get you a spot. But it's paramount that Wilson puts that pressure on and shows, hey, I'm capable here. I can be a number 2 or number 3 back. If he does that, Dylan's job becomes a little bit more questionable. But it starts with Wilson having good practices. I thought didn't get much of an opportunity, but got 2 handoffs and made the most of them. And again, one really, really nice run on the day. Tyron Hopper was a player that I mentioned a couple times in OTAs and mini camps and even rookie mini camp where he was shooting through the line and making plays in the backfield. He made another one on Monday, shooting through, making a play behind the line of scrimmage, run stop. Again, not any live tackling, of course, but he's starting to make a little bit of a habit out of it, which of course we love. How he continues to respond as a young inside linebacker, we'll have to wait and see a little bit. But he makes almost like a play every practice that makes you go, like, that's pretty impressive. And he made another one on Monday. Nice day for LVN. He had a couple pressures. There was a play where it looked like he maybe threw one of the offensive linemen to the ground. I want to say maybe Rasheed Walker. Some of that stuff, sometimes a foot gets stepped on and somebody starts falling back and the defensive lineman takes advantage of it. Could have been something like that, but did look like a couple of really nice pressures from LVN. Screen game. I talked the other day, so I think somebody asked in the offline Q&A of like, what's one sort of player scheme that I would love to see Green Bay do a lot better? My answer was screen game. Green Bay's screen game has been not good, and it needs to get better this season. It's kind of the one thing that's really been lacking in this Matt LaFleur offense. It always doesn't look great. And they had another couple screen plays called, and one to Dylan went nowhere. Another was basically had to be thrown into the dirt because the defense was all over it. Not a great start to the screen game for the offense. But what I will say from a defensive point of view, when you are an aggressive attacking defense, which we've heard Jeff Hafley wants to be, and I think we saw even some of that from day one of practice, what are you susceptible to? Sometimes you can be susceptible to traps, counters, screen plays, anything that gets you upfield or going in one direction aggressively, and then you can counter in the other way, right? And screens are a huge part of that. You get 4 or 5 guys rushing upfield, and then you throw it over the top on a screen, and now you've got a bunch of blockers, and those 5 defenders are behind you. You've got the ability to make an impact play. But I thought for a defense that's being super aggressive, they read the screen game really, really well, and we're all over it on both occasions. But again, it's got to be something that the offense really, really gets better at because it's been such a struggle for them. Kingsley Enagbare had a would-be sack, so nice job for him. He had a nice day. And then I kind of mentioned it in the Sean Clifford portion, but Dontavian Wicks had 2 fantastic diving catches. I mean, both of them were red zone period. Both of them were highly contested, and he went and dove and came up with both receptions. They called both his touchdowns. I think one of them would have been down around the 1-yard line, but either way, who cares? He went out, got the ball, made 2 really, really tough catches, and just continues this rise of Dontavian Wicks that we are all very, very excited for. Again, it's up to Wicks to kind of keep that moving. It's 2 diving catches. Awesome. You're not going to get in the Hall of Fame for that, but it was a nice day of practice, and he certainly made the most of those 2 opportunities. My players of the day, I'm going 1 on offense, 1 on defense. Sean Clifford on offense. Again, are we talking about a Hall of Fame level performance? No, but he ran the offense really well, avoided turnover-worthy plays, navigated the pocket, threw 5 touchdowns at least in the red zone period. Good day for Sean Clifford. I thought really, really nice day. And defensively, I'm going Rashawn Gary. You get 2 sacks and limited team period opportunities. Yes, they're against Andre Dillard, but you still got to make the most against who's across from you. He made 2 impact plays, and he gets my defensive player of the day. So Sean Clifford, Rashawn Gary, my 2 players of the day. That is going to do it for me. My full recap of day 1 of training camp. I'll be back tomorrow or today as you're listening to this on day 2. Quick recaps right after practice, and then, of course, a full episode for Wednesday as well. Make sure you're subscribed to everything, like, comment, give those 5-star reviews, and, of course, check out those Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube memberships as well. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members, Mo Saden, Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Dad, Brendan Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Dan Miller, Alex Huang, Arnaldo Espinoza, Peter Rataka, Caleb Cookster, SoCal Pack, and Dan Guessford. See you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.